Well, exactly. So every child during the sessions has their own football, and we have sort of 200 different skills within the syllabus, which Simon built, and the way that they're sort of graded on that, because it's quite an individual sort of pursuit that they're doing. That they might do some drills in pairs with things like passing or other areas, but mainly they're working with the ball by themselves. And Simon had a great analogy, which was that if you're a musician, you don't join the orchestra straight away. You master your instrument first, and then you join the orchestra once you've been able to do that. And that's very much our philosophy, that master the technique with the ball, and then when you're ready, you go and join the team.
From Coordinate Sport, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts, and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest on this episode is Fred Lowe, Managing Director of global football franchise brands SOCATOTS and Brazilian soccer schools. Fred had a unique introduction to football, being in the director's box from age 5 when his father Rupert was chairman at Southampton FC. He talks candidly about his experience and how it sparked his love for the game and eventually led to transitioning to lead the business from founder Simon Clifford. The programs are based around the Brazilian version of futsal. Fred walks us through the program philosophy and the story behind the launch of the business and growth since he joined. We hear about his thoughts on the industry as a whole and what goes into growing and maintaining a brand across 15 countries. Enjoy the show. Okay, so delighted to have another global success story with us today. The Brazilian soccer schools and SOCCATOTS brands have scaled over the last 20 years, now working across 15 countries with approximately 20 franchises in the UK. So really looking forward to getting the inside story on the business with Fred Lowe, Managing Director. Welcome to the Drive Phase podcast, Fred.
Well, thank you very much for the intro, James. It's good to be here and good to be able to sort of tell the story, I suppose.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks very much. Again, I mean, what we tend to do is try and get to know you a little bit better to start with. So for the listeners, and the way we do that is just kind of looking at your early life. So are you able to tell us a little bit about your earlier life?
I haven't really moved too far. So I was actually born at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, and I'm still sort of living around here now. And throughout my life, I've probably had one major passion, which has turned out to be football, probably for the reasons that basically, you know, a lot of people's foundations are set through their family, I suppose. And, you know, my father was heavily involved in football from, you know, when I'm trying to think of the actual ages here, but I think I was sort of 5 years old when he first sort of joined Southampton as he was the chairman of Southampton for about 10 years. He wasn't involved in football before that, but so he had quite a different outlook maybe to, you know, many of the people that were involved that sort of play football or were involved in it. You know, he had a different outlook. He was more of a sort of business person, I suppose. And then it was an opportunity that he ended up getting involved with. And yeah, from the ages of, I was around 5 years old up until sort of 15, I think it was. So, you know, right in my formative years, I was, you know, traveling to every game home and away. Obviously became a huge fan of Southampton during that time, got to visit many different cities around the UK, which obviously was quite interesting, and also many different stadiums. And, you know, football basically grew to be, you know, a huge passion of mine from that. I think, you know, I used to play a lot. I don't support Southampton in the same way probably as I did then now, but I'm still obviously a fan, and good to see us doing quite well at the moment up the Premier League table, which is nice to see it going into Christmas.
Yeah, definitely. I'm an Arsenal fan, so we'll leave that.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, I actually quite want Arsenal to do well, because, you know, I think they've always played football the right way, and I think Arsene Wenger's. Did you see Arsene Wenger's Desert Island Discs recently? That was quite a good listen, I thought.
Oh, I'll have to check that one out. I missed that one. But yeah, you're right. In terms of the way football's played, I'll definitely touch on that when we look at the philosophy of the business. Hopefully, there's a bit of synergy there. One question we always ask is kind of looking at school and kind of the impact of kind of PE and school sport on your life. So obviously, you mentioned there about football and a different experience to many. But in terms of school, did you have your first experiences of sport? Were they shaped in school in terms of participation?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I've never been that good at any particular sport apart from football. And I think that's basically because I played from a very early age, through probably what my dad did, played from a very early age, maybe a lot earlier than a lot of my school friends would have done. And that meant that I think I got to a decent level, but I wouldn't say I'm probably the most natural sportsman or athlete, as they say. But I think I got to a decent level playing football, and that was probably most of the participation I've had within sport has been football, and that's where I was sort of going with my earlier discussion. Really, was that was my main passion in life, all the way along, and that's why I made a decision early that I'd want to somehow work within football or sport in general, which is quite a difficult thing to achieve, but very rewarding thing to be involved with. Very much, I'm sure you'll agree, as someone who's also involved with sport.
Definitely. I mean, in terms of university, etc. I know you went on to study. Did you study in Leeds, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I studied politics, which is very different to football. Maybe not that different. I don't know. And that was just through that was something that I did at school, and then ended up doing relatively well at it. So my school basically said you should probably carry on with politics and apply to do politics at university. But looking back, I would have probably looked to have done something more sport based. And I know you can now do through UCFB particularly, you can do a sort of football based qualification or sport based qualification a lot more. There's actual courses now that particularly focus on that.
Those are the ones around sports leadership or executive.
I wish that kind of thing had probably been around when I was a little bit younger. But when you're young, you don't always have the same sort of surety in yourself that makes you make decisions like I would do now. You rely on others, I think, a bit more. So I think that does come into it a bit. But looking back in hindsight, which is a beautiful thing, that's what I would have done.
Looking at the company, we want to get into the origin story and kind of how things were launched. But as it is now, are you able to just kind of talk about, obviously, two really well-known brands, but are you able to just talk us through the offer and kind of the philosophy behind it? Because it's really interesting kind of origin from around the programs.
We've got two very distinct brands, obviously, SOCCATOTS being the first one, which is for the under fives, and Brazilian SOCCATOTS coming a bit later. But they very much follow each other. So we ideally, we want the children that join our classes to sort of start as early as possible. And that's where SOCCATOTS, I think, has its, USP, if you will, that we start a lot earlier than most other sort of, with the exception of swimming. I think, we start very, very early on, from as soon as they can walk, really. Or we do have some non-walkers classes, but they're not that well attended. They're not that popular, but there is a couple of phase 1 classes, we call them. So we have phase 1, 6 months to 1 year old. Phase 2 is 1 to 3, and phase 3 is 3 to 5. Parents are actively involved throughout all the SOCCATOTS sessions again, which is quite different. And that is what allows us to start at that age, because the parent is basically the one-on-one coach for their own child. And then our coaches are there just to sort of run the session in a sort of, from a perspective of, moving from activity to activity and that side of things. They're showing the parents what to do, and then the parents will very much do each activity with their child, which allows us, to start a lot earlier, because it means that there's not lots of children, for one coach to look after 12 children, which we have in each class, would be very difficult, unless you've got the parent there at all times, which we do. So, and I think we're teaching them a lot of other things, not just football. They're learning to throwing and catching, they're learning, the balance, the coordination, all of those types of things as well, colours and numbers, and we bring in a bit of sort of extracurricular stuff.
That age, those motor skills are so important. I mean, do you see that because they're starting so early? Do you see the kind of the progression as they're going through your programs? I guess as opposed to someone who joins in. I guess you've got some parents and children who've been with you since they were 6 months, and then others might be joining at 2 or 3 or 5. Can you see the difference in the children when they've gone through the whole program?
That's completely right. I think Brazilian soccer schools is the sort of second part, which starts at 4 or 5. Most people, probably 60 or 70 or 80% even of our customers at SOCCATOTS level will carry on through. And if that at that stage, I think there's a sort of, if the coaches that we have very much say that if they have someone that joins Brazilian soccer schools that hasn't been to SOCCATOTS, there is an extremely high noticeable difference in ability or how. And it's not just ability, it's sort of even the listening aspect and the way our sessions are structured. The children that come into Brazilian soccer classes without having been to SOCCATOTS they're not ready to just learn straight away, and they have to take a bit of time to obviously get used to how the sessions run, how to respect and listen to the coaches and carry out the activities. So I think from all standpoints, it does have a difference.
Definitely. So with the obviously Brazilian soccer schools, the philosophy behind that, and that's the football to Salão. Is that how
Exactly.
get my pronunciation correct? Can you just expand on that? That model obviously is brought over from South America, but for those listeners who've not heard of it before,
Brazil are obviously a hugely successful nation within the footballing sort of framework, and they've won 5 World Cups, so that's pretty impressive and something that we can only dream of, I suppose, here in England.
Everything's working.
Exactly. So, Simon Clifford, who was the actual founder of the soccer schools, I've noticed that I've seen you've done a few other podcasts with other people, and I think most of the people you've done interviews with, when I had a look, were sort of founders of their business. And I suppose we're a bit different with that, in that, we got involved a little bit later on and took over the business from Simon Clifford, and then have sort of tried to obviously take it to a new level from there, rather than actually founding it ourselves, which is a bit of a different story.
From my research, Simon's created the model. So I think you still use some of the curriculum today, right?
The curriculum has not changed one bit. He built an incredible syllabus, which, well, he basically travelled out to Brazil is where the story started. He was a fan of Middlesbrough, and he sat next to Juninho, who was a Brazilian player, back then, I think 95 sort of time. And then through that, he became friends with Juninho. Juninho was obviously very surprised that we didn't use these particular footballs that they use in Brazil, which are heavily weighted and quite small. So they're size 2, and they have 10% of the bounce of a normal football. Juninho was shocked that children in the UK weren't using these footballs at all, basically. And so from that, Simon obviously managed to get some good contacts through Juninho's father and maybe others, and managed, went out to Brazil, looked at how they were using these footballs, which, essentially would have been, on the street in quite an unstructured manner, and sort of brought a few of the footballs back and built a sort of syllabus around that, which basically encompasses that, trying to capture that sort of the way that they would have been playing, in groups on the street with their friends in small areas, tight little areas, lots of touches on the ball. Their technique hopefully was being built very, very quickly. They weren't focusing so much on positions or on anything like that, or tactics. It's very much just, play with the ball, love the game, and, in a small area. And hopefully by doing that, you'll be able to increase your technique very quickly, and then be able to bring that on later on, as a sort of more maybe tactical or positional player.
So kind of all about that, I guess, first touch and manipulation of the ball,
exactly,
building confidence, etc. Do you have, just out of curiosity, in terms of your curriculum, do you have like an award scheme built in there, so they're learning different skills as they're going through, for progression wise, or how does it tend to work?
Well, exactly. So every child during the sessions has their own football, and we have sort of 200 different skills within the syllabus, which Simon built, and the way that they're sort of graded on that, because it's quite an individual sort of pursuit that they're doing, that they might do some drills in pairs with things like passing or other areas, but mainly they're working with the ball by themselves. And Simon had a great analogy, which was that if you're a musician, you don't join the orchestra straight away. You master your instrument first, and then you join the orchestra once you've been able to do that. And that's very much our philosophy, that master the technique with the ball, and then when you're ready, you go and join the team. But it's very difficult to grade people without playing matches or having some sort of competitive framework. So to sort of get around that, he developed something called the skills badge scheme, which is very similar to the belt scheme in karate, in that we have 6 different levels, and obviously as the child can master, for example, if dribbling were taken as one of the elements, juggling even would be the easiest to explain. If you could do sort of 10 juggles on one foot or either foot, you might get to level 1. And say if you could do 200 or 300, then you might be at level 5. So it works in that way. The program's broken down into all these different areas, and they've got to sort of complete all the different areas to then move up the levels, and they get a sort of box set and some coins once they've achieved each level, which hopefully keeps them engaged.
I was going to say, yeah, in terms of retention of participants, huge for all clubs, but also like as a business and as a franchise business, which we'll get onto. That kind of that award scheme and that levels means you're going to have parents and children coming back, right? Because they want to keep progressing and keep moving on to the next level.
That's exactly, and also, during the lockdown, for example, it's very much something that, as long as you've got a football and you sort of understand the syllabus, you can very much do it in your back garden, even if you've got very, very small back garden. These are all things you can do in quite a small area. So it was very much something that we were looking for them to do during that time as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so in terms of the business model overall, is it franchise business? Obviously, we touched on earlier on. How does that tend to work? I mean, is it 20 franchises in the UK? Do I get roundabout there?
That's about right. Some of our franchisees have more than one franchise area, but there's about sort of 20 licenses that we've sort of got in the UK, and then we have sort of we're within 10 or 15 countries, but that's not always over the whole country. Usually they'd start in a small area, like, for example, Canada. We're just in British Columbia, and then hopefully we can build from there. But we're within sort of that 10 to 15 countries, as well as our footprint in the UK.
Great. So yeah, I mean, you touched on Simon and how he kind of created the syllabus, etc. I noticed as well now he's kind of I don't know if he's still involved in the biz, but I know he's moved on to be kind of, I guess, Hollywood, I suppose, choreographing some of the football films and stuff. I noticed that.
Yeah, so he was very much involved in, I think it was sort of things like Keira Knightley and Bend It Like Beckham. I think that was one of his earlier, football films that he got involved with, and I think that's very much continued. I think he did the recent English Game, I think it was called, on
the Netflix one. Yeah, I sort of noticed that.
He's not involved in the business anymore, but from I was actually involved for a short while he was still involved in the business, and he was very much a source of inspiration for me, just in the way that he'd created, built this program from nothing, built it up to have, a very good footprint around the world. And, it's not easy to do that, especially with, I think, businesses like this, the sort of sector we're involved with. It's not easy to build something from the ground up. And, he managed to do that without any sort of, he was, born on a council estate in Middlesbrough. So he very much came from nothing and built something that is an amazing thing to, have the legacy that he has of setting it up. And hopefully we can continue to hold him as our founder and make him proud by what we can achieve, because he was very much a big effect on my early career as well, because I learned a lot from him, while I was working from him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually remember some of the marketing from back when I was younger, seeing it and seeing, like, I know you had, I noticed recently it was the anniversary, had SOCCATOTS coming over and playing in Leeds, and the branding's always been strong. Obviously the Brazilian soccer schools, the uniforms that the kids are wearing, it's like, I guess, inspirational, right? You see the green and yellow and the blue shorts, everyone kind of gravitates towards it. So I know hopefully that's been a source of success. I just wanted to touch on, in terms of you, I know you mentioned there, but how you actually got started in the business. Obviously, you're based in, was it that the Leeds connection then when you were at university? Is that when you kind of joined the business?
I was at Leeds University. To be honest, I wasn't particularly enjoying my course, what I was doing. But, my dad had always been very pro the fact that you need to sort of decide what you want to do, and then you need to start to try and get involved with different things to sort of learn, even, while you're very young.
By that, do you mean kind of getting into the industry, like internships, etc.?
Yeah. So, I knew I wanted to be involved in football in some way, and I was thinking about a couple of different things, like being an agent and various other things that you can.
So that politics degree solidified that decision, then, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I didn't really enjoy it so much, but it's a means to an end. You've got to get the degree, prove that you can stick it out, and then hopefully go on and do what you want to do. But yeah, so Simon basically gave me the opportunity to come in, once a week, really, just to sort of learn from him, which, was very valuable at that time in my life, because he's very different from my own dad, but in some ways I think that was, very, very valuable to sort of have another father figure that was very different, and someone that I could learn from and take little bits from, and I think it was very valuable to have those two different people to sort of look up to.
So at that time, were you I guess working as volunteering on coaching sessions, or working as a coach, or was it more of an internship set?
I mean, to be honest, I was just hanging around at the office, and one day I might be sort of tailing Simon doing something, another day I'd be just watching another coach. It didn't really. It was quite sort of informal. It was just I used to turn up and help do whatever people wanted help with at that time. But it was very, very good to, I suppose the position that I'm in now is very much a circumstance of that, in the way that things unravelled.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that in terms of the transitions. Obviously, different setup now. I know you kind of, is that right? Your global franchising side is that based out of Poland at the moment?
Yeah, so us and the franchisees that own the Polish franchise work together on doing the international franchising, because obviously they've got a big franchise in Poland with sort of 5,000 or 6,000 children. We've got a big franchise here in the UK, so we've worked together on sort of the international side of things.
So you kind of coming together to break into new territories and
exactly, and a lot of the training, well, pre-COVID, obviously the training's very much done sort of on site. So when, for example, if we have people who become interested in the franchise, we can either host them in Poland or the UK, or train them in Poland or the UK, which is quite useful, for example.
Are you able to expand on kind of that transition? So was it around 2011, 2012 time when you took over the business?
Yeah, I think it was 2010, 11. And, the business got into a few difficulties sort of after, obviously there was the financial crisis and various other things. I think, they just got into a bit of difficulties, and then we ended up taking it over at that time. And sort of, like I say, the syllabus is very much not changed. And, that's a testament to the way that it was constructed by Simon, because it still delivers the same value it did then, which is obviously, developing hopefully footballers really ultimately, but obviously not everyone is going to become a footballer, but a footballer of some kind, hopefully. And, that hasn't changed. I think what we've tried to put in place is just a more robust structure of things behind the scenes, in terms of probably the business side of things, like, the sort of software and IT platform, and, how the franchisees access all of the content, in terms of training and everything like that, which has become clearly this year, we've now got to train people online. So it's become even more like a lot of other things. I think it's accelerated a lot of what we were trying to do anyway. I think we've had to accelerate very much to sort of, go even further than maybe we were going to go before with that particular issue of training.
I'm interested in that. Obviously, I guess 2010, 11. Would you be just finishing university at that point? I mean, I'm just thinking it's a big step at that point to kind of step up and then have everything on your shoulders, I guess, as MD. Was that how it worked? Did you move into the MD role straight away?
Well, I think in the end it was just that there was no one else that we didn't particularly. We didn't pump in lots of money straight away. It was very much let's try and live within our means, and so I was sort of the only full-time employee at that time, just trying to piece things back together. But the great thing was there were some amazing people that I met that were franchisees at that time, and that's we've got within the UK, we have the head coach of the Brazilian soccer schools program is actually a franchisee who's based in Jersey, called Will Partington, and then the head coach of the SOCCATOTS program is a different franchisee who has Milton Keynes area, and he's called Paul Darton, and they've sort of obviously formed the rest of the team. We also now have a Katie who helps us with the support side of things and the IT, but back then basically formed great relationships with Will and Paul, and they've very much helped us put things into a form where hopefully we now deliver a great platform for people to build their own businesses.
So personally for you though, was that like a bit of a baptism of fire, do you think? I
think so, yeah.
I get it, almost like a startup mentality of you coming in and having to wear all the different hats and stuff at the time.
But that's what I say was that I had those people around me, luckily, and they turned out to be obviously now they're I'd count them as friends and people I work with very much, and they'd obviously had great, they'd been running their own franchise for many years, so they had the sort of experience maybe that I didn't have then. I suppose, and that very much counted for a lot.
Definitely, I guess that's the power of the network, the power of franchising. You've got that safety net or support network around you at all times, even for the other franchisees.
Yeah, that's something we try and obviously really encourage them to do amongst themselves.
Definitely, and I guess from then to now,
what's the growth been like? I mean, 20 franchisees now. Was there more at that time, or did you have to build back up again to get to the 20 in the UK? I mean,
yeah, we've sort of built back up. We probably haven't grown as fast as we would have liked. To be completely honest with you, and I don't mind being honest about that, internationally and within the UK. But we do have, I think, all of the franchisees we have are performing, very well, which is obviously, a good thing to have. We haven't particularly lost any franchisees during that time, so I think that can be a source of pride and happiness, really, that we do have a very stable and group of franchisees who are turning over good amounts.
Yeah, definitely. I think probably, if I might be wrong, it's probably just anecdotal from my point of view. I guess I kind of see your business maybe being a bit ahead of its time. Like there's a lot of competition now, where back in when it was launched, I don't think there was anything like it. If I'm maybe.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Especially with now you see, we're part of this sort of, I suppose it's a trade body called the Children's Activities Association, which is a group of sort of businesses like our own, and you see, it's got to be at least 100 members, and I think we're all driving at, I don't know how many children it would have if you counted each different company and how many children they had under their banner, but it would show that the industry is actually extremely large, and parents must be spending a lot of money on all these different activities. But like you say, I think it is very much a competitive industry as well in terms of franchising.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, football in the UK, most popular sport, it's going to always attract competition. I guess this is a difficult question at the moment, but in normal times, if you kind of go back to that and imagine that kind of pre-COVID time, what would you say is your kind of main recurring challenges, like day-to-day challenges that you have when running a business? Well,
personally, I would say it's probably very different for each different person that you sort of have on the podcast, but I would say just managing a franchise network is quite challenging, especially because each different franchisee is slightly different, and I think you can very much draw the analogy to a team, and some characters in the team you need to put your arm around them, and some you need to sort of give them slightly different treatment, but it's sort of it's a very difficult balance to strike, because I think even if, depending on the times and what's going on, and the treatment can be different from for each different person. So I think that for me is the biggest challenge of holding together a franchise network and sort of constantly driving them to sort of increase their numbers of children they're coaching, and deliver better sessions, and you've always got to drive them to do more, and obviously you've got to be that person that wakes up every day and has the sort of, I suppose, mentality to keep doing that, I suppose.
So the classic is the classic was it man management, right? So the football man management that gets banded about. It's the same within the business. We always ask about what's the biggest setback. What's been your biggest setback in business? I'm assuming it's COVID this year. I don't know if I'm jumping to conclusions or not, but if it is, or you could tell me what it was. How did you deal with that? What would it look like for you guys when everything kind of kicked off?
No, I'd say definitely 100% it's been this last year, but you've already touched on it. It's great to be able to have a network of people to sort of navigate things with, and actually, even our, the rules have been very difficult to sort of for us to, I suppose, dig down into, just because there's, we don't sit there as a sort of a company or a activity that the government are really going to say this is what you should do. So you have to obviously draw different pieces of information that they give out and try and fit that into what we do, and then make the decision about whether we feel comfortable to run or not to run, and all these different things. But I think having the network of people to speak, even the franchise network to speak to, and even people in other countries that we work with, has been very, very good. And I think it would have been a lot harder to be doing it on our own. That would be one thing.
I think you're right on that in terms of the messaging coming out from the government, especially around the sector. I know you're not the only one. A lot of people say the same things are really vague or just open to interpretation. So I guess when all your franchisees are trying to interpret it differently, and you want to get a kind of a steer on it and give some guidance, it's got to be difficult. And I guess also you can see what other countries are doing, right? All the other 15 countries you're working in. I guess you think, well, maybe we should do like Poland are doing, or like, yeah.
That's been quite interesting, because I think South Korea, for example, where we are, had sort of an early outbreak a bit before us, and that sort of gave us speaking to them actually gave us quite a lot of positivity, because they'd sort of got through it and they were wiping down all of their venues and spraying them with all of the disinfectant, and they managed to get back up and running. That gave me a lot of positivity to be able to see what they were doing. I mean, subsequently it's turned out that they had to shut down again, and so did we. But at that exact time, it was useful just to.
So you're almost forecasting like 4 weeks out where we're going to be in the UK.
And obviously, every different country's reacted slightly differently, but I think on an overall level, you can sort of see how it's gone. With
out of curiosity, I don't want to get political, but out of your network, if you see, which one would you say kind of handled it the best? If you're looking at countries, or the ones who had the best results in terms of business-wise, being able to get back up and running? Well,
without wanting to sort of sit on the fence, I suppose, and sound a bit like a politician, I think Australia seemed to have dealt with it pretty well. But in my own mind, I don't know whether that's just that they've locked down their borders and they've managed to stop it coming in. But at some point, will they have an outbreak? I don't know. But sitting here now, I would say that's they look to have dealt with it relatively well.
I guess it's hard not to be I guess you'd call them a destination, right, rather than a hub. So I guess if not to be too hard on the UK, people are travelling through and a lot of people coming and going. So that might have been.
No, that's probably right. And obviously, each city in Australia is very sort of quite far apart. So easier to sort of shut them down. But
just on those measures you've taken, I was watching some of the videos I think it's on your Facebook page, and head coach Paul was kind of walking through what you've had to put in place. And I was just curious in terms of how quickly you're able to do that, and what those measures have been. Because I know the children always get their own kit anyway with you, so it might have been easier for you to transition. Is that right? Like they've all got their own ball. Would that be easier in COVID times? And
I think the main differences were that we used to sort of hand out the equipment, and the children used to sort of pack it away as a bit of a sort of that's something that you want to get them into a good sort of routine of putting away their own equipment at home and all those types of things. But very much we had to sort of slightly change things like that, where they actually have now their own set of equipment, they get put in their own area and all of those types of things. But I think it wasn't too difficult for us to actually transition into that. And actually a lot of the feedback we've had is that some of the parents, there's some parts of it which people would like to stay, so it's quite interesting. But I think the main point is that actually most of our customers were happy to come back and sort of participate in an activity again. And I think across all different industries, you saw the pubs, everyone's been able to, I think, do a very good job of becoming COVID secure. If it's not a very nice term to probably have to use, but people know what I'm saying when I say that. And I think it's probably cost a lot of companies quite a lot of money to extra put on all these extra safety measures. But I think most companies have had to take that on the chin. But it's we were luckily rewarded that most of our customers came back, and the ones that didn't were replaced by a huge new influx of people that we got after the first lockdown.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that we mentioned it on the pod before, but the kind of pent up demand that we're assuming is there, and I think all believe that it's there, that's going to come flooding back. I guess that leads me on to the next question around growth plans. So obviously that would have been impacted by this year. Where do you kind of see the business? What you've got a goal for the business next 5 to 10 years, or is there any countries you're trying to get into, or how does that obviously growth? But what does it look like? What does the business look like in 5 or 10 years time?
Well, I think within the UK we sort of mapped it all out, and I think in our own projections we saw that there is space for sort of at least 80 or so franchises. So that was the ultimate target. Obviously this year, there's still interest in the franchise. It's just, obviously no one's going to pull the trigger on, and nor would we want them to, because obviously we'd potentially be selling something that we couldn't really, deliver on at the moment, because we don't really know how everything stands and when things will go back to more normal.
You can't forecast first year revenue for them, can you, at the moment?
But I think the general thing is that we're continuing to speak to people who are interested and keep them informed about how it all operates, and hopefully there'll be a bit of a pent up demand, in the number of franchisees that we can maybe bring on. So I think as soon as things come back to a position where we're delivering regular sessions and we're not fretting about when the next lockdown will be, then I'm confident that we might be able to make some meaningful new franchise sales. And actually, that's in my job. I think it gives me the most amount of pleasure to be able to sell a new franchise, watch a new area take on our franchises, watch someone be trained up in how to deliver the classes, and then obviously children enjoy the classes, and you slowly see them hopefully grow up to having a good number of children and being able to create a career out of it. And I think that's that's basically what I want to see. So I'm really hoping that we can get there.
Definitely. In terms of countries or territories that you're not in at the moment that you'd really like to be in, is there any that you've kind of earmarked or I know it's difficult at the moment, but?
Well, I think internationally it's a bit of a different tactic. I think in the UK, it's easier to probably target an area, but I think when it comes to selling an international franchise, it's more of I don't think it's quite as much of a science in terms of how you get there. It's more that I think you just have to keep doing all the right things in each of your countries that you're in terms of marketing and sort of delivering good classes and getting good content out there. And hopefully, someone will come across what you do from, I don't think you can, it's difficult, we found, to sort of target actual countries. It's more that, you get the rewards from just doing the right things within your territories that you're.
I guess you need that the ideal master franchisor for that country, for the master franchise for that territory, right? The person who's got the network who can grow it for you in that specific.
Exactly, and they usually find you rather than you finding them. And in my experience, anyway, they usually would be find you online through something that maybe another franchisee's been doing in another country, or maybe they're even a customer of we've had interest from customers in the UK of people that then maybe move back to another country elsewhere, and it would be something that they would look at. That's the sort of way that it tends to work with the international side of things. But obviously within the UK, it's very much more, targeting particular areas, and you get the interest that way.
More personal question, really. I mean, in terms of your time in business, have you developed any kind of philosophies or theories or ways that you go about running the business that you'd be able to share with our listeners?
Well, I think I don't probably have a particular theory, but the one that seems to maybe be the one that I think makes most sense is sort of, I think it's basically the sort of, I think it's Japanese, and it's sort of theory of Kaizen theory, which I don't know it that well, but in my opinion, it's, that you've just got to work hard every day, make sure you're doing the right things that are going to sort of, push the business forward. That's quite a difficult thing, but once you work that out, I think you've just got to work very hard, make sure you surround yourself with good people, and as long as you have the passion and the belief for what you're doing, I think you're going to get to where you're going to get to in the end.
Definitely. So all those little improvements all add up over time.
To bring it all back, I suppose my father and Simon Clifford worked with Clive Woodward for a very short time when they were all at Southampton, and that was very much Clive Woodward's philosophy that those 1% marginal gains, if you keep working at as many of those as you can, and you can become quite an irresistible force. And I suppose that's very much, I very much agree with that.
For you personally, then, I'm kind of fascinated by the personal development and habits and things like that. So is there anything that you put in place just in your daily routine, things that you do that keep you sane, reduce stress, keep you working at keep you focused, or working at high performance? Obviously a lot of moving parts in your business. Is there anything you do on a daily basis that helps with that? I've
got a sort of another mentor who used to run the business before, a couple of years before I did, he's called Mark Rash, and I work with him. He helps me to sort of set my goals and make sure that I'm keeping to them, which is a good function to have, I think. And he's taught me something that, all the goals that you do have, you need to keep them somewhere that you look at quite often. So whether it's on your fridge or next to your computer or whatever, I make sure that I've got, whatever I'm aiming for within the next, I suppose, 1 year and beyond, I have there. And that would be something that I do, to just keep my mind on what we need to, where we need to get to. But I think away from work, I'm very much someone who likes to play sport, whether it be, I suppose, football or, more recently. So now I'm getting a bit old for football, and I've moved on to, a bit more tennis and squash and things like that. But I think that's a great reliever of.
I thought you were going to say golf then.
sometimes. So I think that's a great way of doing that as well.
Yeah, definitely got to stay active, reduce the stress. Last question for me, and we always ask this one, is a bit of reflection really. So if you could go back to your time when you started in the business, let's say about 2010 times, and you could just go back in time and give yourself a little message, what would you go back and tell yourself?
I'd have to say that, judging by everything that's gone on this year, I just think, the message would be in that I'd sort of probably just try and stress the importance of, not trying to build, all of the IT and tech side of things as well as the sport side of things, and maybe have done that a bit quicker, if you see what I mean, given, the fact that we now need everything to be online, and with all of the remote working and everything like that, I suppose it would be that. So it would be slightly pandemic related, maybe.
Definitely poignant. So again, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll leave everything in the kind of in the show notes. So anyone out there who's interested in a franchise, or just wants to get in touch, they'll be able to get hold of you. So yeah, thanks again for your time today.
Thanks for having me, James.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.